Altos is brought to you with the kind compliments of Rituals Coffee House.
Good evening and welcome to Altos, a weekly news and current affairs program produced by the Catholic News and broadcast here on Trinity TV and on TTT. I'm your host, Neil Parsonlal. Here's a look at this week's top stories. Archbishop Gordon joins us live on set today to discuss all things Synod, 1 week after the third Synod gathering, where the local church reflected on bringing hope to the nation. We also hear about a new book on the Synod, Caribbean Reflections on the Synodal Journey. Primary and secondary school educators receive trauma training to help their students. And visually impaired priest Father Michael Trestrail tells us about his running and fitness lifestyle. And now for our top story. Synod is the new buzzword in the Catholic Church, and building on the outcomes of the recent Global Synod, Catholics gathered at the Center of Excellence Macoya last Saturday to discern how to read the signs of the times and inspire hope in the Church and the nation. The Archdiocese is also preparing for the Jubilee year next year. Laura Pickford-Gordon tells us more in this report.
Father Peter McIsaac, Director of Synodal Transformation, led participants through the Conversation in the Spirit discernment process. He said the question of what would inspire them to give hope to their respective communities was very important. The shift to a synodal church is not easy. They had to be conscious of not just what God is speaking to them, but also how God is present and speaking in their neighbor.
Remember that trust is part of this whole process. We need to feel comfortable with each other. We need to trust each other. And not everything that I have prepared, I necessarily want to share with the group. And that's fine.
Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon shared on his experience at the month-long Synod of Bishops in Rome last month. He presented 4 verbs to keep in mind on the synodal journey.
Relating, listening, discerning, and I'm not impressed with it at all. Make sure that I can come. With these 4 verbs, every level of the church, every grouping in the church, everywhere we see church gathered, these 4 verbs should be guiding us over the next period of time.
The Worldwide Church is celebrating the Jubilee year next year. Team leader of the Jubilee Year Committee, Vicar General Father Martin Sergiu, highlighted some of the events that will take place in the Archdiocese. On December 29, the Jubilee door will open at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, and a Eucharistic Congress will take place in May.
There's a youth march in September. There is also a festival of hope at the Center for Excellence in October. There's a social justice event in November. And then there is the closing of the Jubilee year in December. There are other activities in the vicariate and also in the parishes.
Trauma is a very serious issue for children of the nation and can affect their learning outcomes. Teachers of 4 Catholic schools recently received training to transform their schools and classrooms into trauma-informed areas. The Archdiocesan Trauma Resource Team conducted pilot workshops for about 120 educators over 2 days at the Assumption Parish Hall in Maraval. The 4 schools selected were St. Anthony's and St. Francis Colleges and Bethlehem Boys and Girls RC. The sessions were led by Father Gerard Maglon, head of the Trauma Resource Team. The workshops are intended to improve access to training and trauma sensitization services for Catholic organizations. A 2023 Archdiocesan survey, which collected data from 14 homes and 16 Catholic organizations, revealed different types of trauma across age groups. The most impacted were children ages 12 to 19 and preteens aged 0 to 11. And we continue this week with our focus on the regional seminary. Part of their task has been to market the seminary's academic block, which houses its theological arm. For those who may not know, the seminary's theological school is geared toward those individuals who have a desire for intellectual growth and formation, and not only those interested in becoming priests or religious sisters. Clisha Best chatted with the first female dean of the institution, Dr. Adana James, and brings us more in this report.
Seminary has an ethos, so it's not just that it offers theology, but it offers theology in a particular way. And so we are very happy with all the changes that are coming forth from this synod, because we have already been on track with a lot of what Pope Francis and some of the other synod documents have been pointing to. So there's a lot of intermixing in terms of the way that we approach our courses from the pastoral context, so it's not just theory.
Dr. Adana James said the theological school offers 12 to 15 courses per semester, which mimics the University of the West Indies' calendar, meaning they have 2 intakes, one in September and the other in January.
Right now we have an enrollment that's almost 50, right? But it's still quite low when we look at the enrollment across the board. So on average, we would have very small classes, which help with the dynamic of learning. It means that you have the one-on-ones with the lecturers. This is not something that people would have in an environment like UE, for instance. And so it helps the learning process, it helps community, it helps family, but we could always do with a little bit more.
Many of the courses are undersubscribed, and Dr. James is hoping to attract more students.
Because there are some courses that are quite undersubscribed, and it's basically because people don't know that much. I am sure that if people were to know, yes, it is open to any and everybody, and yes, if you would like to, you can come study and you can do it from the comfort of your home. I'm sure that I would see more persons coming. So it's just to say that we do have these classes, they are available.
Registration is currently open for the January intake, and interested persons can contact the seminary at 290-1683 or 662-4293 for further information. I am Clisha Best for Catholic News, Altos.
The book launch of the highly anticipated Walking Together Caribbean Reflections on the Synodal Journey took place at the Living Water Coffee Shop last Sunday. The event featured the authors, key contributors, and notable Catholic Church leaders. Altos correspondent Kayla Jordan has the details.
Walking Together, Caribbean Reflections on the Synodal Journey is dedicated to Archbishop Emeritus Edgerton Clark of Kingston, Jamaica. Author Father Don Chambers shared that Archbishop Clark inspired the connection between communion and synodality, and he spoke about his own gradual realization that synodality's meaning is found not only in the scriptures and church's tradition, but also from everyday life and relationships.
I remember, for example, waiting at the baggage claim at the Miami International Airport, witnessing 2 men conversing. It struck me that their posture and their disposition reflected the spirit of synodality. Opening posture, leaning towards each other, making eye contact. And out of this observation, I craft a piece entitled Synodal Eyes.
Archbishop Jason Gordon, who wrote the book's foreword, also spoke at the launch. He provided insights from the recent Synod Assembly in Rome, noting that while synodality is challenging to define, it represents the Church's commitment to walk together and listen in unity with Christ.
One of the things that haunted the Synod, and certainly at my table and many of the other tables, is what is synodality? It's like nailing down Jell-O, if you ever try to do that.
I am Kayla Jordan for Catholic News, Altos.
It's now time for us to take a short break, and when we return, we speak with the man himself, Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon, on the synod process. Before we go, here's a look at the trivia question for this week. Thanks very much for staying with us. We have on set with us today Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon, back from Rome a couple of weeks now, hasn't brought back anything for the host of Altos, but we welcome him back to the set, and Your Grace, it's always good to have you here.
I have brought back joy, peace, and the blessings of Pope Francis. I'm not sure what else you want.
Archbishop, it's really great to have you here, but you're back from Rome. What were the significant takeaways you had from that synodal experience in Rome?
People have seen the Synod in many, many different ways. We have to see the Synod as a new way of being church, as a new operating system within the church.
Okay.
So it's like when you change your iOS,
right, so we're going,
in your phone and in your computer, you have to see that way. And you know, there are three takeaways from first is the document that was prepared, which is, I think, a really great ecclesial text. Second is the experience that we had in the synodal hall and what that did for the participants for this 2 months that we've been together over the 2 years. And third is the way that Pope Francis pitched the synod at the very end of the experience. So I'll start with the third one. After we deliberated for 3 years as a church, and information came from every parish, to every diocese, to every Episcopal conference, to every continent, up to the Universal Church, we had the first synod on that. We went back again after that and came back up again. Information came back up. A new document was made. We had our second synod on that new document. We deliberated for a full month on that. A new text emerged again. We deliberated on that new text. A refinement of that text happened again. And then at the end, when chapter by chapter or paragraph by paragraph we voted, at the end when the whole text had passed, Pope Francis says, now I accept that text in its entirety, let it be published immediately, and I will not be issuing an apostolic letter on this synod. This is a text for this synod.
And that is certainly different from what has happened in the past.
It's very different. But also, it means that the text of the synod, of the 355 delegates, has become the ordinary magisterium of the Pope.
Yes.
This is something that is... You know,
that's a new operating system.
It's a new operating system.
And importantly, that was from a bottom-up approach rather than the traditional top-down approach. And that is what the synod is supposed to be.
Usually, the Holy Father will take away the documents, mull over it, and write a document that may or may not have the guts of the conversation in the synod, but it will inform the next stage of the church and her thinking on the particular matter. Not with Pope Francis. He actually allowed the matter to go forward. So I think that's a huge thing.
That's significant.
The second level is what happened in this time. Conversion took place. I'm not kidding you. I saw people who had hardline positions in the beginning of last year, mellowed and understanding at the end of this year. And had exchanges with them about this transformation, because it to me it was stark. And they said, you know, I don't know, I wouldn't say I became more diplomatic. What I will say was I understand more the sensitivities of many more people that I did not understand before. You got a seat at a world church. When you have China and Eastern Europe, when you have Gaza and Israel, when you have the whole of Africa and Latin America and Europe and all parts of Asia and Oceania sitting in one hall, space, and you are interacting with people from all over the world. You are hearing perspectives you don't have an opportunity.
So isn't it we've become a more emotionally intelligent church?
Well, that's what the synod is saying, that relationality has to become the number one way forward for us as church. So the four marks or verbs: relating, listening, discerning, and self-emptying. And all of that is emotional intelligence, all of it. Because you don't self-empty without emotional intelligence.
Tell us, so from Rome, you came back to Trinidad. We had a session last Saturday. How are we translating that into what happened on Saturday, and what's the relationship between that and what happened in Rome?
So on Saturday, we did the first, part of the reception of the synod in Rome. So I went to the seminary and had the seminarian and staff of the seminary. We did something with them. Some of the priests and leadership, we did something with them. Then 700 leaders of the church and reception of the synod in a. And we did it like we did it in Rome. We started with a repentance and then we did the work. And so we kind of mirrored that, which is, I thought was a beautiful formula in Rome and here. But how do we receive this text and help this to become the normal way we are as church going forward? And what do we need to do as individuals, as leaders, as parishes, as groups, to move the church forward with these 4 groups?
And I think that's the question that's on people's minds. How do we now translate all of this into a more practical and relational way of being church? How do we live synod now?
I would say the 3-year process has already brought some fruits. We have already become much more conscious of the relational nature of the church and our need to up our game in that. Are we there yet? No. But I think we're much more conscious, and consciousness is the first step for conversion. But we've also done some very conscious things with our priests and leaders and things within parishes to move the church to relationality. Now we have to really receive this text in a very deep and profound way, and this has to inform how our parish councils operate, how our groups in the church operate, and how the church as a governance and at a parish level operate.
And that part of the discussion on Saturday was, how do we as church now inspire hope? How do we discern the signs of the times? Using the gospel passage, for last week. How do we do that, and how do we inspire hope in a nation where there's so much negativity that you spoke about as well? And how do we as church be that light? How do we speak that? How do we carry that language into the wider national community?
And I think that that's a critical thing. We're coming into a jubilee year. That's a year for forgiveness of all debt. That's a year to put back down the stupidness we was taking for the last however long. And I think as Catholics, consciously, we can do this nation a really great service by putting down the debt of anger, of unforgiveness, of prejudice. The debt of prejudice that our ancestors have held. The debt of class prejudice, of racial prejudice. I think if we as Catholics understand the Jubilee and are willing to do our inner work to move ourselves away from those terrible ways in which we as Trinidadians have brought despair to the national stage, we can then not only model but be a sponge and absorb some of the darkness that we're facing as a nation right now.
The gospel tells us that we ought not to cover the light with a bushel. How do we speak that kind of transformation and that kind of conversion to a society now where we see, in terms and the darkness of everything that is around us, the forex challenge, the crime and criminality,
everything,
the bullying in our nation, schools,
the suicide of our children.
How do we as church speak to that?
The despair of the youth. Well, it starts by everyone recognizing that this is a new kind of year. And we have to have a new mindset in this year. And I'm praying and I'm asking each of our viewers to start praying from now that we would really put on the mind of Christ as we enter into this Jubilee year. I think if we change mindset as a start, if we start treating people like people, if we start listening with a deeper heart, if we become more discerning and asking God, what do you want out of this situation? And if we are willing to do a little self-emptying and put ego aside for a little while. Imagine if we could put ego aside for 1 year and then it becomes a habit and we could take it into 5 years. I think the country would breathe and exhale a bit. And I think we as Catholics would find a new joy from a much deeper place to bring that into our national space.
It's interesting that we see that in light of the Jubilee. One of the activities of the Jubilee is the opening of the 7 doors, and I know you're going to start at the cathedral.
Yes.
There is the imminent threat of one of those doors in Tortuga. We've seen where there's an arsonist suspected arsonist, and one of those, the church in Tortuga, is in fact under threat. How would you as Archbishop speak to that and to the national community with respect to that threat to one of the doors and to the church in particular?
I think you can't isolate it to one church. The Hindus have had a similar experience with a threat in one of their temples. I think, when a country loses the sense of the sacred, the country is in deep peril. And on whichever sacred site, whether it is a mandir, a temple, a church, a house church, whatever it is, when people are willing to do violence to a sacred site, we have crossed some lines that we have to come back from. And I would make a national appeal, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of your persuasion, even if you think you're an atheist, let's at least respect the beliefs of other people. And let's at least see the sacred spaces that we have as important for other people. And let's create that sense of sacredness around all of our sacred sites.
And it was, I think, St. John Paul II who spoke about the loss of the sense of sin as the biggest sin, really. And that is what you're alluding to now, that loss of the sense of the sacred.
Correct. And when you lose the sense of the sacred, the next thing that goes is the most vulnerable in the society.
It is. So we talk euthanasia and all that goes with it.
But also you talk about oppression of the poor. And the real hopelessness we are facing right now is a whole group of people who are underemployed or unemployed and can't find a way to see a hope for today and for tomorrow.
How does the opening of the doors, we speak of 7 doors, can you identify the 7 doors for us?
Oh gosh. But I know we have Tortuga.
We have the cathedral.
We have the cathedral, Superior San Fernando, Curap, Sandy Grande, and Assumption.
You see, you did well. But how does
he's testing me, okay? He's testing me.
How does the opening of the doors and that imagery of the opening of the doors of the church, how does that speak to us as a country in terms of what we need in the country at this point?
So these doors are doors of grace. These are doors of love. These are doors of mercy. And the opening of the door is really symbolic of grace, love, and mercy that is flowing from the heart of God out through all the parts of our society. And no, you let me off the hook, Scarborough, Tobago, St. Joseph, he's not counted. He's failed maths. He took a 6 for 7. He failed maths. All parts of the country, and this was very deliberate, grace will be flowing out from God to the different parts of our nation.
Apart from the opening of the doors, what else can we expect as part of the Jubilee year?
We'll have a lot of activities in the Vicariate. In May, we're going to have a major event, a Eucharistic Congress, where we're bringing in some people, Cardinal Tegeli, who is the head of the dicastery for evangelization of people. He's coming in.
Confirmed as coming?
He's coming in. He was sitting on a minor table with me.
Okay,
over 2 different weeks. Okay, let's just leave it that he's agreed that he's coming.
Excellent.
And we're looking at a few other people to come in for that event. Some of the bishops of our region will come in for that event also. So we'll have that as a major event, and down at the end of the year we'll have a second major event, and in between people will have a little passport.
Okay.
And your passport, when you go to a sacred site, you make sure and get your passport stamped. And at the end of the year, when you have your passport all stamped with all the things that you could have done for the Jubilee, then you have something that takes you into the next year, that says to you that grace from these doors, from the heart of God, has flowed. And now I have to become the door opening for mercy to flow into the land.
Your Grace, we're moving from this weekend is the Feast of Christ the King, for instance, and we go into Advent. What is your message to the Catholic faithful? What is your message to the people of Trinidad and Tobago as we approach Advent, for instance, and the preparation for Christmas?
Stay awake. Stay awake. And that's a spiritual call. It's not don't close your eyes, it's don't close your heart.
Right.
Because the text, the scripture text is, do not stay awake lest your heart be coarsened by the cares of this world, by debauchery and by drunkenness. So staying awake is opposed to drunkenness, debauchery, and the cares of this world.
Okay. Your Grace, thanks very much. We've come to the end of our interview. It's always great having you, and I hope we see you back again sometime to talk a little bit more about the Jubilee.
And I hope you learn to count by the time I come back.
Thanks very much. It's always good being here. Recently retired Managing Director of the Liturgical Commission, Barbara Leake, was presented with an apostolic blessing from Pope Francis. Leake served in the Evangelization Commission from 2004 to 2012, then joined the Liturgical Commission in 2013. She retired a few months ago. Archbishop Gordon made the presentation at a small farewell function on November 14th at the Belmont Pastoral Campus. Chancellor Joan Miller, along with heads of archdiocesan departments and commissions, were on hand to wish her farewell. Best wishes on your retirement, Barbara. We will miss you, and we miss your spirited personality. Have you ever run a 5K or any distance road race? Well, do you know one of our clergy is an active road runner as well? Father Michael Trestrail, parish priest of St. Francis in Belmont, and who is visually impaired, earlier this year competed in the Catholic News Steps for Hope 5K, and 2 weeks ago did the UE Spec 5K. Roger Sand tells us more about Father Michael's fitness journey.
You would have noticed in the crowd of hundreds at the UE 5K on November 10th that running among them was a Catholic priest who is visually impaired. With his aide on the morning, Vanessa Burgess, Father Michael was on his way as the race started at 5:15 a.m. He told us his fitness quest started back in 2016 at his community Companions for Transfigured Christ.
A few days of the week, we would go to the Savannah, we would try Chancellor, we did a 5K back then as well. And then, we all kind of fell off our exercise trains. And within the last, I would say, 2 years, year and a half, I've tried to get back on myself. Started with just walking when people were available, off and on. But then, thanks to commitment of a few people, I am now able to be a lot more consistent, where I try to at least go twice a week with different people sometimes, and I do the gym once a week.
As you would expect, Father Michael has an additional challenge of navigating the terrain as he runs, but he has found it's not impossible.
I run with somebody who, different people have gotten accustomed, so they know, all right, a hole is coming, a bump is coming, and so we've gotten some good practice with that. I hold on to their elbow or to their shoulder, or sometimes their hand, but it depends on how fast we go in and what might be the most comfortable thing at the time. And other people don't realize, they wouldn't think a blind person is running, so sometimes might bounce into people when we're around the Savannah or whatever, and they'll be like, they can see where you're going, and then they realize, oh, he can't see where he's going.
At the UE 5K, Father Michael finished an incredible time of 41 minutes 43 seconds and 465th out of 880 finishers. He told us one day he would like to move up to a longer distance.
I would like to try for the half marathon, but I know that takes a lot of time and training. But I would like to try for the UE half at some point in time.
I'm Roger Sant reporting for Catholic News Altos.
So what's preventing you from starting your own fitness journey? Here's a look at what's in store in this week's issue of the Catholic News with editor Raymond Sims.
In the God at Work edition of the Catholic News, read about how the Archdiocese is bringing trauma awareness into the classroom. And the clinical director of ISD Health Solutions explains why prioritizing sleep is crucial to success. I'm Raymond Sims, editor of the Catholic News.
And that's a wrap for our show today. We remind you, please, continue praying for our church, reading your Bible and learning your faith. We leave you now by saying congratulations to 2 of our schools who achieved excellence at the National Junior Parang competition held at Holy Cross College in Arima last weekend. First-time competitors Fatima College won the secondary school's title, while St. Gabriel's Girls RC School of San Fernando won the primary school's category and also had the Best Lead Female Vocalist and Best Parang Icon presentation. Congratulations to all our schools. Have a listen and do have a good week.
Altos was brought to you with the kind compliments of Rituals Coffee House.